is time for another edition of the Agents of Fandom podcast. My name is TJ Zwarich, editor-in-chief of agentsofandom.com, ready to talk about what some are saying, I'm some people, is one of the very best live-action Star Wars episode of television ever. And I can't wait to dive into this one. It was so incredible. First up, I am joined by my good buddy, someone I know who's loving this just as much as I am, Adam Blevins. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. You know, things could not be going better. I'm still coming down off the high of this amazing Spider-Man 2 outpouring of news we got from State of Play today. We're less than a month away from New York Comic-Con. I can't wait. And then, most importantly, I'm here with two awesome people to discuss this absolute gift of a television program that Dave Filoni has put together for us. Things couldn't be better. I'm incredibly excited.
I am excited as well. This has been something special, and I also have something special planned for this episode. A little surprise, but before we get there, we have a very special guest today. Her second time on the Agents of Fandom podcast. Aubree, how are you doing today? It's so nice to see you again. Oh, you are muted.
Oh no. Hi. I'm doing good. Yeah, things are busy and not busy with the strikes, and I'm just having fun here today.
Well, we are very excited to have you on. Ruben, if you don't mind, our wonderful producer behind the scenes is going to begin orchestrating the surprise I have planned here. I've been excited for this one. It's been in the works being planned for the last couple weeks here. And I'm just kind of, I don't want to spoil it. I'm waiting until our screen changes a little bit here. Come on, Ruben, what you got for me? Hit that like button while you're watching, people.
If
you're watching us on Twitch, there he is. We've been without our fearless leader for a long time. And he is back to join us to talk some exciting episodes of Star Wars television. Garrett Blaney, I miss you, buddy. Welcome back.
Oh, my heart is pounding right now. I miss you all so much. This brings me so much joy. I have had the hardest time keeping my mouth shut. So, hello, everyone. Hello, Aubree. It's nice to meet you face to face, finally.
Yes.
TJ, I wish I could hug you. Adam, you're handsome as ever. And everyone listening, I miss you guys so much. And I'm so excited to give you guys my thoughts on Ahsoka.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on Ahsoka. We've been texting throughout, but it feels so good to see your face again. It's not the same texting. I'm so happy to have you back. So if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. If you're watching us live on Twitch, thank you so much, everyone who's tuning in. And make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. We have so much to talk about. There's Spider-Man 2 news. There's Aquaman, a new Aquaman 2 trailer. But we're not even going to dive into that because Ahsoka was just so crazy and we have so much to talk about. Garrett, I want to throw it to you first. What have you thought of the series so far?
Yeah, so I was trepidatious at first. It didn't strike me immediately. My expectations were admittedly very high going in because you know, TJ, you know how much I love the character of Ahsoka, and it wasn't quite hidden for me at first. Not that I was not liking it, but it just wasn't what I wanted it to be. I feel at this point we are kind of firing on all cylinders, and I am strapped in and just absolutely ready to go for next week. Admittedly, I'm a little bit worried about the side plot of Hera and the New Republic because I'm not going to be as interested in that as soon as we learn about whatever other galaxies are happening. But I've enjoyed the arc that it's funny. It's kind of how Rebels grew on me. I watched the Clone Wars and then, went straight into Rebels, and it's such a jarring difference that I was like, my comfort animation is gone, and like it's so different. But then I eventually grew to realize that it's the superior show, and that's kind of how my love for Ahsoka is developing so far. So it's a fun journey, and I'm happy to be on that ride. And thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. The master has been gifting us some great content. Aubree, the last time we talked with you, we were watching Secret Invasion, a show we were a little less fond of. But what are your thoughts
Little.
on Ahsoka so far?
I love Ahsoka. Oh my gosh. I like grew up watching the Clone Wars. I grew up watching Rebels. I love Star Wars. I don't remember a time without Star Wars or before Star Wars. I've just always known that Star Wars was the thing. Watching this show has been amazing. I know I like have friends who worked on it, and I worked on it like maybe like all in all 30 minutes in a span of like multiple months, and I didn't know a ton at work. So just like knowing that it was like brewing has been super exciting, and so finally it happening is has been mind blowing, and like I think I had a lot of trepidation thinking I don't know how well it's going to be executed, especially given some of the more recent Star Wars series and how it's executed. It's very 50-50 on how the volume and things work. But I think that this series is phenomenal. It's probably like one of my all-time favorite like new Star Wars content things. And of course, like Hayden especially totally made this episode, and he just made me so happy.
He's back and he was incredible, and we're going to dive into his performance as well as a lot of other things. I sent all three of you a rundown, but honestly, if there's things that your heart, your mind just takes you somewhere and you're excited about, don't worry about the order. Just go in wherever you want. Adam, I know you said you didn't like live surprises. You were worried about how you'd react. I gave you some time to simmer back down. How you feeling? And what did you think of episode 5?
Per the surprise, I'll address that first. Incredible, Garrett. It's great to have you back, man. We've missed you very much. I was not.
I lied to him
expecting that.
directly.
He did. He told me him and Nino were going to see a movie, and
I had a feeling if he knew there was a surprise, like this might be one of the top of the things on the list. So I was like, I purposely was like, I'm gonna go see a movie with Nina tonight, hoping that might divert him. So
I thought it
so
was
mission
proud of you.
success.
strange that he didn't
So proud of
say
you.
like that. He didn't just say I'm going to see blank tonight. He's like, I'm just going to see a movie. That's like Garrett is not a vague person. For those of you that, so I was like, that's kind of strange. Like he would if he was actually going to see a movie. But you know what? That's his own business. I'll let them have a good night. But no, that's great, man, Garrett. It's great to have you back, buddy. But to not drag up too much time on my little portion right here. As for this episode, this was, I mean, like I said, this was just a gift. Like for me, as like a Clone Wars person, watching Anakin and Ahsoka like for so long, for what, 6 seasons technically if you don't count season 6 and the Clone Wars. Like, man, I was tearing up. It takes a lot in something like this, not as much actually, but it takes a lot to kind of get me to tear up. And man, as soon as I realized what was going on, like when she fell into that sand right there, and like you can hear Ariana Greenblatt say like, "Wait, this is the Clone Wars." I started like jumping. I was getting giddy in my seat, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is happening!" And then he came out wearing the armor, and I just the tears were flowing. Man, that was like they nailed every single aspect of him, like the look, the hair, the armor, everything. And then Ariana Greenblatt as Ahsoka, incredible. I mean, I could just go. I could keep going on and on and on about this forever, but it's just 12 out of 10. No notes. They did an absolutely perfect job with this. And what I thought, before I pass it off, I said what I thought was so interesting is that this technically wasn't really even a flashback either. Like this was like the two of them in their current conscious, or at least like so I still don't really know exactly what version of Anakin this was. But this is like Ahsoka kind of in her current conscience, just in like a younger version of herself, like what she knows now, but in this younger version, which and that's like a tricky thing to pull off because it would have been so much easier to just, oh, this is like a flashback or something for like 2 or 3 minutes. They really took a risk here and it paid off perfectly. I mean, they did an incredible job. I couldn't be happier.
That was one of the things we talked about, Adam, when on our last show, is I was like, I hope we get some kind of Clone Wars flashback. And when it happens, I would love for Ahsoka to be voiced by Ashley Eckstein in it. And then Ariana Greenblatt just came out of nowhere and absolutely crushed it. She was amazing as young Ahsoka. The chemistry with Anakin was absolutely off the charts. Like Hayden and Ariana, it was like they've been working together for years. When they were fighting, when they were talking, when they were arguing, it was fantastic. Starting with the Clone Wars flashbacks and the two of them, Garrett, what did you think when all of a sudden Anakin chops off the bridge in World Between Worlds. We're getting the flashback. You hear the clones. You see a young Ahsoka. What's going through your mind when this happens?
You actually kind of a little bit know what's going through my mind because I texted you this. I was like scanning so hard for Rex the entire time, and I was like, I think I see him. I think I see him standing there in the background, and I texted you, and I was like, I need to know where you're at right now in this episode because I need to confirm some things for you. And then obviously I ended up accidentally spoiling something for you, not realizing the time we were pausing at different times.
No.
But I was looking for Rex. Oh fuck, I was scanning, and I was so happy when he eventually, spoke and was more featured. But that was when I knew we were getting it, or when I realized we're in the Clone Wars, like I was gonna be very unsatisfied if we got through it and I didn't see my commander, my commander.
Did you see that in the credits? They had Captain/Commander Rex.
I did, because then that confirmed that I did see him standing in the background in the first one, and then by the time the second flashback or memory or whatever we were in, he had risen rank. So I really enjoyed that, and I've seen some complaints about we've seen the Clone Wars before in movies, like why didn't we just see like full on battles or whatever, and I understand that to an extent, but I also am not convinced that it would have been pulled off in a way that we would have been like, yeah, like I feel like if we had gone to that magnitude, then this conversation would have been much more like, they didn't pull some stuff like, and I don't want to go into that terror. I think it was pulled off fine. I think it looked great. I was not at all taken away by like the smokiness or whatever. I was hyped about it. I loved it being back in the Clone Wars. It was so cool. And yes, Ariana Greenblatt was incredible. No notes.
She's killing it right now. Barbie, Infinity War, and now Ahsoka.
Future superstar.
We were speculating, theorizing, why is Ahsoka here with Anakin in the World Between Worlds? And the answer that they gave us was, Snips, I have one more lesson left to teach you. Aubree, what did you think about the interaction between the two of them, the pulling into the Clone Wars? And that was another kind of complaint that I had heard of, like, he said he had a lesson, and all they did was fight. But I feel like it kind of went over people's heads then, because there was a whole lot of between the lines teaching going on in that moment, in those moments.
Totally, yeah. I mean, I think like their interactions for one were like amazing. It was really fun to see them in live action and that interpretation. But I think my take on the scene was that like Ahsoka, like the Force and the World Between Worlds basically like used that moment to suck her in and show her that lesson, and that's actually like Anakin because he is one with the Force. And so he was, again, like in the episode, it's stated that he is like showing her like you either live or die. And it reminded me a lot of like Hayao Miyazaki's The Wind Rises. And in that movie, there's the phrase, the wind is rising, you must try to live. So it's not necessarily just like, you just can't die, you have to live. It's like you actually have to like live life to its fullest and actually like be happy with that. And so the whole episode when Ahsoka is fighting, she's unhappy and discontent that as a Jedi, she's no longer a keeper of the peace, that she is actually a warrior for the Clone Wars. And that is a lot of why like we saw Barriss Offee end up deciding to leave the Order. We saw even Anakin had some issues with what was going on with the Jedi Council and their decisions in wartime. And so because of that, you realize that she had found her identity in being a warrior for so long. And while she had been a warrior and had been trained to be a warrior, she had to like kind of realize that that's not all of who she was. And she was more than that, and she amounts to more than that. And I think that was very symbolic in her telling Anakin that she wasn't going to like try to kill him or strike him down. Because in that, she realized like she's not a warrior. Her job isn't just to fight and kill. Instead, like there's a lot more to that, and she can choose not to do that. I guess. I don't know. I feel like that was a wordy explanation, but
No, I get that completely.
Great.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, I think we saw it kind of in Rebels, is like she, at the end of Clone Wars that last season, like she thinks Anakin is dead, and then in Rebels, there's like this moment where she like passes out when she like finally feels him and realizes like, oh shit, like I know this presence so deeply, but it's also like just concealed by this like black dark hate, and like obviously that's an arc that she goes through between seasons 2 and 4 of Rebels, and she finally comes to term with like the fact that yes, Anakin is now Darth Vader, and we see that at the beginning of Ahsoka, and now she's on this journey of, and we really saw a lot of it in this episode of like, it's not my fault. Like I stepped away. She even says it at some point. It's in The Mandalorian or one of her appearance. She says something like, I know what it's like to see a full blown Jedi Knight like feel these emotions or whatever, and like she know I stepped away, and she said she's alluded to this, so she feels this guilt to it, and now she's working on this resolution of that, and this I wasn't there. He's in the Siege of Mandalore scene or whatever, but we know he's not actually there in the timeline. He is becoming Vader. He is Vader at this point. So him being there is her realizing like, it's not my fault, I was away. So there's also this catharsis to it that leads to the resolution at the end of her being more similar to her younger self, and her and Ariana Greenblatt's versions are more aligned and more like Ashley Eckstein. So it's a really beautiful catharsis, I think, and I loved watching it. So that was a great explanation, Aubree, to add some more wordiness to it.
And it's like, it's something you see throughout the Clone Wars. Anytime Ahsoka is on her own on a mission without Anakin, she meditates. And towards the end of her meditation, she's quiet, she centers herself until she can find Anakin. And when she finds Anakin within the Force, she knows she's not alone and she feels better. At the end of Clone Wars, after Order 66, she has a scene where she attempts the same thing and realizes he's just not there anymore. Breaks into tears, and then it's like you said, Garrett, the next time she feels him is when Vader is chasing after them in Rebels, and she has to come to terms with the fact that that's him. And Adam, this is something you and I have been talking about a lot on the show, of the broodiness and the stoicness of the Ahsoka we've seen so far. And while we kind of knew this was something that Dave Filoni wanted to write in, because she was grieving. She still blames herself for Anakin's turn. But there was just something, maybe we didn't know if it was Rosario Dawson or what, that just felt like a little bit off with it. But we really see that explored in this episode, and then by the end, which we'll get into more, it's a different person. It's a totally different person. It's the old Ahsoka that we know and love. But this episode, we see emphasized, she was a child soldier. She was young. Getting to see that be Ariana Greenblatt and not just an animated person, she was young.
It really put it into perspective, to be honest with you, because even in like the last season of the Clone Wars, she seems like older, and then to see a literal child out there like cutting bodies up, you're like, oh no, that's actually traumatic. A teenager. Yeah, it's like I'm laughing through like the trauma that I'm processing.
Yeah. And I think that's even more underscored when she's on Ryloth with the clones. And if you remember that episode in the Clone Wars, the reason why a ton of clones are like hurt and dead is because she messed up and she made a call that went wrong. And if you think about that, like that she's a kid and then she was placed into such like a traumatizing, crazy, heavy position to make a decision like that, like it's a lot more poignant, because you do realize like, oh wait, it is messed up that they are putting these kids in these positions, and there's a lot of trauma and guilt that goes into that. And what's cool about it is that we actually got to see like Anakin and Ahsoka talk afterward in this, because in the TV show we didn't really get that opportunity to see that at all.
And so we see the trauma from the child soldier. We see her trying to deal with the grief of Anakin becoming Vader and dealing with that being her fault. that's partially the lesson that she's trying to teach, that Anakin's trying to teach. Adam, I want your thoughts on this because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it's so much up for interpretation. The way I took it kind of was so similar to X-Men Days of Future Past, when when Patrick Stewart tells Jane McAvoy, old Professor X tells young Professor X, Charles, we need you to hope again. That's kind of the vibe that I got out of this, because like, Ahsoka, if your time's not done, if you're still going to be going out there, we need you to be the light. You can't be holding on to this. We need you to move forward. How did you take it, Adam?
Well, you did you did a great job. I want to say shout out to talking about this in your review that you wrote up on agentsofandom.com, that there is more that I think she needed and this version of Anakin to show her. Like there's still a reason to keep going, which I think a lot of this stoic seriousness that you were just talking about is like part of the reason. Like she was lacking that reason, which is kind of part of why we were seeing this version of her earlier. I know we were giving her a lot of shit, talking about whether it's Rosario Dawson or whether this is just like a completely different direction for the character. But they've done a good job, like each episode this season, kind of peeling back those layers, showing us why she's acting this way, and then resolving it in this episode. I mean, I couldn't have asked for more, and I really hope that we get to see this. I don't expect the same. I feel like I'm setting myself up for disappointment if I expect the exact same Ahsoka from the Clone Wars. But just throw it back to last episode, and we talked about this a little bit last week. Like an episode that I absolutely love, but when the first 5 minutes of that, I was frustrated with seeing her, like the way she was talking to Sabine, how Sabine was talking about Ezra, and then Ahsoka kind of just being like, look, like if this is what we need to do, we're just gonna have to say goodbye to him. And I was like, that's not Ahsoka. That's not the Ahsoka that I know and how she would handle this. And it seems like already from there to now to the end of episode 5, she's in a completely different place. She's ready to go full Jonah, jump into the belly of this whale to go find Ezra and find Thrawn. And it's not just, it seems like her mentality with that is not just, well, this is the right thing to do. It's like Sabine wants this, and I'm going to go, and this is my apprentice now, and I'm going to go on this journey with her. I'm going to do the things that like I never got to finish with Anakin and do these things with Anakin. Because like, I also think it's not just like Anakin didn't get to finish her training, but so much of the Clone Wars, the two of them are split apart, like going on these different missions, like fighting this war, that they didn't have this like stereotypical Jedi Padawan relationship. Like, I mean, obviously Anakin was still a good teacher with what he did get to impart onto her, because he didn't stick to that dogmatic, like narrow-minded view. But like, I think she is like really self-conscious now about wanting to be a better master, not even just like where her master failed, but just wanting to do the things with Sabine that Anakin never got the chance to with her. Like she knows now, I've got a chance to do this, like, and I'm going to do it right. The entire execution of everything was flawless, man.
It really, really was. Garrett, I want to know what you thought about some of the action sequences between young Ahsoka and Anakin and Rosario Dawson and Anakin, because getting to see the two of them fight was pretty darn cool. And the transitions of like Ariana Greenblatt with the green lightsaber, then the blue lightsabers, and then bouncing back to the white with Rosario Dawson, it was pretty incredible. What did you think of the action sequences throughout this episode?
Yeah, no, I loved it. We saw some really textbook moves from both of them. We saw the Anakin like lightsaber twirl, which was so great. The spin. We saw at one point the Ahsoka like grab the other person's lightsaber, disarm, which was just great to see also. And then I thought Ariana Greenblatt's fighting was like very reminiscent of the animation, like as well as it could be. It was really cool. It was very like vertical or horizontal and like acrobatic, and it was very fun to watch. Also, I loved seeing the Maul Mandalorians. That's such a cool throwback to a great season of the Clone Wars. So yeah, I think the action was great. I think the smokiness allowed for some really cool trends. Obviously, we'll let the cat out of the bag. We're gonna have to talk about it eventually. Some of the coolest shots Star Wars has ever done. The transitions between Anakin and Darth Vader were great. I think you can't complain about that. That's just peak Star Wars.
Peak. It is, yeah.
And I think that the environment that they had allowed them to pull it off really well. The editing is great. It's those kind of Star Wars shots that fans are gonna think about literally forever. There's all of our favorite Star Wars projects have them, and this has just rocketed itself to very close to the top of the list for probably a lot of people. So, just a phenomenally satisfying episode to watch visually and emotionally.
Kudos to, this is why we need to pay writers, pay actors, because the performances in this episode were just so incredible, and they really show, they let the talent of the people involved really shine through. And with the, like Gary, like you said, the cinematography with the transitions between Anakin and Darth Vader, whether it be in the smoke or back in the world between worlds, but specifically Hayden Christensen is just so special. We don't deserve this man who received so much hate after the prequels. I mean, it was basically 50% people fawning over how handsome he was, and 50% people talking about how terrible he was. And the dialogue was terrible, but he delivered it pretty damn well. And it's like Adam said in the chat, Hayden is the best there is with a lightsaber. And his facial acting, transferring from Darth Vader back to Anakin to Darth Vader, back and forth. Obviously, the effects with the eyes were cool, but how soft his face was versus how hard it was just incredible. And also, how you can tell. He talked about this at Fan Expo Calgary when I was there. He's watched all of Clone Wars. He's watched all of Rebels multiple times. He loves it. And you can tell he was emulating Matt Lanter's Anakin Skywalker from the Clone Wars throughout this. It wasn't just the haircut. It wasn't just the armor. It was his movements. It was his posture. It was his stances, the way he talked. And I thought one of the things that was so cool was the way he would change how he fought when he was fighting as Vader versus when he was fighting as Anakin. He was flashy, twisting, spinning whenever he was being Anakin, and then whenever he was Vader, he was switching back to just all-out power and efficiency, smooth with his movements other than his strikes. It was just such incredible stuff. What a part of the action sequences stood out for you, Aubree?
Let me think. I think one of my favorite parts was when they go back to the world between worlds and Anakin does that, like, the twirly move. It reminded me very much of Revenge of the Sith, and I think I screamed because I was so excited. But yeah, I think it was fun to see him in like those different versions of himself. I think sometimes when I've watched the Clone Wars or when I watched the Clone Wars, there are times where it's hard for me to like connect that version of Anakin is like the Hayden Anakin. It almost feels like a different character. But the way that he was able to like go between those different versions in a way that like felt natural, I think helped me. And even there, like with the fighting, we got to see that too. So I thought that was really fun and definitely really exciting and immersive.
Adam, you get the snake pick on our transition of topics because I want to know what stood out for you for the action, but additionally, I kind of want your take on the symbolism of the fight because right from the beginning throughout the end, it's paralleled with multiple different Star Wars stories. You know, they begin their fight with her saying, "I don't want to fight you," and Anakin goes, "I've heard that before," from Luke telling him he doesn't want to fight him. And the fight ends with Ahsoka lightsaber to his neck, and you can tell she is tempted because she's pissed. She feels like she let him down, he let her down, and she's angry. And we see Luke in the original trilogy in the same situation, doesn't do it. He passes the test. He doesn't kill Vader, and he turns Vader. You see Anakin in the prequels fail the test. He's sitting there with the two lightsabers at Dooku's throat, and he fails the test. He absolutely takes his head off, and he falls to the dark side. He becomes Vader. Ahsoka gets the same test, and she passes it, which was leading to her continuing her life. What stood out for you for the action, and then what was your thoughts on the symbolism throughout Ahsoka's stories with the train of masters and Padawans that she has come from?
So for the action, one thing that was so interesting to me is when his lightsaber switches to red for the first time. You know, part of one of the things, the most iconic parts of Darth Vader fighting is that like he is more machine than man. He can't really lift his arm. Like he still has the power and especially like that connectivity with the force, but he can't like be doing all the swinging and stuff like that. He is severely scarred and injured and hindered by these things. But it was like this version, like the actual Anakin version of Vader, which I think there's really, I believe Hayden has said he's interested in doing like a what if Star Wars type scenario where Hayden or where Anakin like survived and went to the light and never turned into Darth Vader. I think there's also a really interesting parallel for that story in like, what if Anakin beats Obi-Wan and becomes Vader, but doesn't become disfigured? Because that was kind of what I picked up on when he was fighting. Because like he was lifting his arms above his, he was still fighting with that same power. There was a very distinct style, but it was still like the dark side. You could tell he was fighting through anger and with the dark side, not with the light. So for the action, that was what stood out for me. But I mean, the Luke parallel, like that was incredible. And if I'm sad to say, I'm on record to say I'm slow with this kind of stuff. I didn't pick up on that as soon as he said it. Like, that's the first time I've heard that before. And then I saw like a tweet about it after. I was like, oh, like I did like the point in me. I'm like, that's where he was talking about that from. But like, that's beautiful execution right there. And I think both of them in both of these different partnerships, like for Luke and Anakin, they both needed that. Like Anakin needed somebody to be what he's now being for Luke and for what he was for Luke and for Ahsoka. But like, instead of having somebody like that, he had Palpatine, what was he doing? Convinced, like Garrett said, do it. He was convincing him and trying to talk him into cutting somebody's head off, which is part of what led him down that path. I mean, he was headed down that path a long time before, but still, like that was part of what really set him kind of on the path of no return. But like, it's just a perfect example of like, whether this version of him is this Mortis God connected with the light and the dark or whatever, he's like still a perfect teacher. And like, he knows what it like in those final moments, like what it takes to connect to these people who I would say are probably, maybe besides like Padme, like the second and third most important people like in his life. Like he knows what it takes to set them on this path that they need, that he didn't have anybody there to do that for him. Because like, we all love Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan was not a great teacher to him and was often not there for him when he needed it. So like, I don't know. They did a great job with that. One of them, I feel like I'm saying that like to finish off every point, but that's like how I've got to them because they really did. They executed everything perfectly in this episode, man. It was incredible.
Hayden was so spectacular, and my read on the situation is I think he wants to keep doing more Star Wars, which is spectacular that Hayden and Ewan McGregor are just down to come back and do this stuff despite some of the reactions of the prequel stuff. Now that the kids,
proves they weren't the problem.
Kids, exactly, 100%. But now the people who were kids when they watched the prequels are adults, we're all clamoring to see them back for the nostalgia purposes, and they're knocking it out of the park when they do so. If we were Garrett, I'm setting you up for your first day back, and I'm already making you give me theories, which you don't even like doing, but too bad, buddy. Get used to it. What do you think it could be next for Anakin? If he were to show up like in something that makes sense, how could you see him continuing in the Star Wars universe as the future? And how the hell do you think he was in the world between worlds? Is this... we see in the episode, it can't be a past Anakin because he's lived the whole Vader experience and he's come to terms with it. Is it just a really strong Force ghost? Or do you think it could have a connection to the Clone Wars from that episode on Mortis, where the father of the Force really wants Anakin to take over his role? Do you think maybe Anakin has now assumed that role and that's why he's so powerful?
I think that, is definitely a possibility, but I don't necessarily think like he needs to be that to have this interaction in the World Between Worlds. I mean, what we know about the World Between Worlds through Dave Filoni's own like exposition and what he said and stuff is like, it is like a Force realm, which is kind of what Mortis is as well. It's also like it's a realm. It's not like a planet or a galaxy or anything. It's like a place of being within the Force. So we know at this point in time he is a Force ghost because he shows up, at the end of Return of the Jedi as a Force ghost. So I think it's just absolutely possible that Force ghosts know how to use the world between worlds to pop up at the points in time that they do. And essentially, that's probably what Yoda finds out in the Clone Wars when he's when he communicates to everybody how to communicate with Force ghosts, like Qui-Gon and everything, that whole journey. So I feel like it's kind of like a portal in that sense. But I don't necessarily think those two are connected, but I do think that they are both correct. I do think he is probably that's such a big storyline to just leave flopping around, and I think I learned today that there's another Force god called like Abeloth from the extended legends, who is like kind of like the mother. So there's other lingering storylines there, and I'd love to see those explored. As far as Hayden returning, I wouldn't want to see. I would want to see, if there's like a Mortis father thing, like that's cool, but no, like bringing back to life or anything, or just like a Force ghost guiding the path of the new Jedi Order, kind of thing, because we know that's going to happen at some point with Rey coming back. So there's ways to do it where I think fans will be happy, but it's also not like fan servicey to the point of we're like ruining the story. And I hope that that line is able to be walked, because yeah, I think having Hayden back is a treasure. I think this is absolutely his brightest performance in Star Wars. I was very iffy when he showed up at the end of the episode, and the aging didn't look great to me, so I was a little bit trepidatious. But then they pulled it back this episode. He looked fantastic, flawless.
He
smooth,
just looked
just looked
himself
normal.
without the eye wrinkles.
Yeah,
it was just spot
great.
on.
It was great. So I think, and obviously maybe further down the line we can bring him, if he's a Force ghost, we can just bring him back as like an older Force ghost so he looks like himself or something. I don't know, but I think there's room for it, and I'm open for it. With you, I love that that Hayden and Ewan are so down to just get back into it, because like I said, I think it's clear now that it was the source material and never them. So it's a treasure.
It really is. Aubree, what do you think is going on with Anakin? Because he surpassed regular Force Ghost in this. He wasn't the translucent kind of same version we saw of Qui-Gon and Yoda and Obi-Wan in the past. He pulled Ahsoka into her memories. He was in the world between worlds. He was fighting. And he was also using the dark side. He was fully just aware that I was Anakin Skywalker, I was Darth Vader. I am the whole of my parts. What do you think is going on with him, and do you think there could be a future with his story?
I think the world between worlds, because it's like a nexus in the Force, like weird things can happen, and of course, like the Force is really weird. And so I have a feeling it was almost like kind of like within the world between worlds, the Force was able to make almost like a Force vision for Ahsoka, but that it was also able to like let Anakin as a Force ghost like in with it. So she was going through like parts of her life, and he was like walking through it with her and showing her that like she could actually learn if she looked back and realized like the things that were actually going on, as opposed to, or like emotionally the things that were going on as opposed to the actual events. But I think what's really cool about it is it's also kind of mirrored by, or it's mirrored in Clone Wars when we see Qui-Gon appear to Yoda and take him on his little midichlorian Will's adventure. And then we also see, I think in Mortis, like Qui-Gon talks to Obi-Wan too. So, and even also Ahsoka, we see like Qui-Gon help Obi-Wan as well. So we see that in this giant legacy of like this Jedi line, they're still helping one another. I mean, so I think Anakin was doing it very similarly, because if you think about that line, it starts with Yoda, then it goes to Dooku, which is very important because Tales of the Jedi, I think we got more context into that legacy. And then we have Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka. But I think because there's been such an emphasis on master and apprentice and legacy and things like that, that that's why Anakin was able to help Ahsoka that way. In regards to the future, I don't know. I mean, I think Mortis could be cool. Mortis is connected to the world between worlds somehow. We know that through Rebels with the mural. Um, I think it would be cool if Anakin was the father, especially because he is the chosen one. So clearly he is kind of special, and very different than the other Jedi. However, I don't know. A part of me is like okay with him being at rest and just being one with the Force. So I don't know about the Mortis thing. I don't know how I feel about the Mortis thing. But I think in the future we could definitely see him as a Force ghost. I think if the sequels have Ben Solo, that could be interesting to get Ben and Anakin to finally talk. Oh my goodness. Maybe he would like that could be therapeutic for Ben. But otherwise, I think more Clone Wars stuff would always just be like a delight.
And if the Mortis thing does happen, if he becomes the father of the Force, a Force god, whatever you want to call it, if that's the route they're taking it, I think the route that will be followed will be Ahsoka transitioning to being the daughter and the light side of the Force in that future after death kind of thing, like Anakin, if they were to go that route. Adam, we really saw Ahsoka be leveling up in this episode. You know I love my big, like, Super Saiyan moment, kind of where we got in Obi-Wan, where he was like, "Fuck this, I've had enough," and he's throwing rocks around everywhere. Ahsoka in these last 2 episodes, at times we have really seen her prowess, and in this one we get to see her find a Force echo and find that memory and dive into that memory so she could learn what happened with Sabine and the map, similar to how we've seen Cal Kestis do it in the Star Wars Jedi games. And they really made it sound exactly the way they do in the Star Wars Jedi games. Like, the way their voices were faded and the little noises that, like, the dinging noises that they made, it sounded exactly like the video game. And then she, at the end of this episode, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, communicates with the Purrgil, similar to how we see Ezra doing in Star Wars Rebels. She also takes Anakin to having to cut the floor out in front of her at the beginning when they're just having their regular duel. To what extent do you think we see Ahsoka level up in this show? I think they were showing us some serious symbolism at the end with her donning all white, similar to how she does at the end of Rebels with Ahsoka the White coming. How much do you think she's gonna level up, and what were your thoughts on what we saw from her in this episode? Because I don't think we've seen her communicate with something like a Purrgil before. I don't think we've seen her sense a Force echo before.
Well, no, you're right. I definitely don't think we have. But one thing that I always view, I'm glad you brought up this Jedi Survivor stuff and the Force Echo, because for those of you that have played Jedi Survivor, you know, like, how does Cal Kestis like develop these different skills? It's through a skill tree, and like I know that's kind of corny to like draw a parallel here, but that's how I don't always view like when we see somebody use like a different ability like this. I'm not always. Are you okay? You look like you're about to.
I didn't want to cut you off, but I did have a point that fits with that. Like, the artwork for the intro and the credits, it looks like the Jedi Survivor skill tree. All of their force symbolism that they have, the map, and the place, there's so many Jedi Survivor vibes in this show, and it goes right to the credits. It looks like a skill tree.
Yeah, it does, and it's one thing. Like, that's how I always kind of think about like gaining, not necessarily gaining, but like people then like having the aptitude to use the Force in these different ways. It always feels more like expansion than just like horizontal expansion than like vertical. Like, not just like they're getting stronger, they can do more, but it's like, because like Aubree said, the Force is so strange. There's like so many different things that you can do. You can touch an object and sense its past. You can heal people. You can choke people. Like, this is like really there's no limit, and they could keep coming up with new things. But like, to see Ahsoka continue to kind of expand her arsenal or repertoire, like abilities like this, it's really neat. I will say the only thing, I don't know how they could pull this off. I think she would be like one of the first people, maybe the first person to ever do this. it would be cool, and I think it actually makes sense for the story after what we see in this episode with her and Anakin. So what do we see in the last episode? She taps into the dark side briefly to throw Shin against the wall, and she
Fuck, that was
realized
cool.
it was really cool. And then we realized in that moment, like, that was her. That wasn't this like balanced control. She's like angry and afraid for Sabine, and she's like, I've got to like tap into. Like, that's what we see all the time. We see it from Seer and Cal Kestis in the Survivor games, like tap into the dark side in this moment of like need, not necessarily pure anger. I think for Cal it was a little more anger, but like I would love to see Ahsoka, and I think she's the white lightsabers. Like, she is the perfect, with her training, her history with Anakin, the perfect person to be able to just go back and forth, like with Will, not back and forth from the light side to the dark side, not like in that moment, like when she throws Shin against the wall because she's pissed off or because she's scared, to be able to like navigate both sides, like with comfort and not be like
Like,
too afraid of like jumping to the dark side. Like, go
like
ahead.
Anakin was in the flashbacks.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I think that's like for like level up wise, like I can like gaining some of these little powers and stuff. Like, it would be cool to see her like use a force heal or something like Rey's done, like anything like that. Any one of like little powers and stuff they add from other people, that's always going to be really cool to see. But like pure level up, I think that's about as far as, I mean, she's already, I think, the most powerful Jedi or force user at this point. So like, I think that's the only place that we can take her to like level her up anymore, is to then give her that aptitude of both the light side and the dark side that she has access to without fear of like leaning too far towards one side or the other. That would be really cool to see. And I think it would actually make sense for the story after what just happened with her and Anakin in this recent episode.
Shout out to our Twitch chat making some great points. I see Britt just popping in for the first time. What's good, Britt? Thanks for coming.
Hey, Brett.
And MTF making a great point, and he says, I still want to see my idea where the lightsaber color changes slightly when
That'd be
someone
cool.
taps into the dark side. What I was actually just going to say is when Cal Kestis shows up for the first time in live action, I would love for his lightsaber to be pink and for him to have like kind of purified his kyber crystal like Ahsoka did, and so it was white. But as Cal tapped into the dark side just a bit, it gave it a pink twinge to his lightsaber because the kyber crystal just seeped a little bit of blood and it made it go pink as opposed to red, because he's not with the dark side, he just tested out the dark side, and I think that would be really cool. Speaking of level ups in this one, Garrett, not only did we get to hear the name Kanan Jarrus for the first time in live action in this episode, that was actually the first thing that made me tear up and give me shivers when that happened in the episode. Hu Yang says, Jason has special abilities. His father, Kanan Jarrus, was a Jedi. We hear Kanan, and his fucking son, Jason Syndulla, is the man. He's the reason why Ahsoka is alive right now. He senses the connection between the sea and the world between worlds. What do you think of Jason Syndulla?
I think he's the MVP of the episode. He hears those lightsabers. He taps into, like, this is an untrained, force-sensitive child who's just like, sounds like lightsabers. That's impressive. You know, we know how much it takes to develop those abilities. So it's very, and it also opens up this interesting thing of like, something that The Last Jedi introduced of like, well, we know the Force runs through everything, but like people that aren't necessarily Jedi can tap into the Force, and we see that a little bit with Hera, where she attunes herself. It takes her a second, but then she, you know, she knows Kanan well. They were together for years. She knows, she has insight into what it takes to be a Jedi. So she listens for a bit, and she's able to hear that as well. It's a really cool moment. I love that we're opening up that side of the Force, especially since we know we've been told from the beginning that the Force runs through all living things. So a little bit elitist that only some can access it, but we can talk about that for later. Jason, I think, is great, and I'm excited to see him develop. It opens up the question of who is going to be the master for Jason. I think Ahsoka is busy. She's got her own thing to figure out, so I think it has to be Ezra. I agree with you, and I think that that's a really meaningful thing. I don't know, someone who's more nerdier in Star Wars than I, tell me, has there ever been a father-son not father son, but the master trained the apprentice, and then the apprentice trained the master's kid. That was hard to explain, but has that ever happened in
Obi-Wan
the Jedi?
and Luke, technically.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah,
Not much, but it happened
yeah,
for
I
like
guess.
a day.
I
From a
guess,
certain
yeah,
point of view, I
okay,
guess you can
okay.
you can say it that way.
But it would be really cool to have that connection and to see them actually spend more time and to really get into that relationship, and for Ezra to explain how heroic Jason's father is, and how much he means to people like us who love Rebels. And so that's exciting for me. And Chopper is just such a son of a bitch. I love him.
I need more chopped. That's been my one complaint of Ahsoka so far is I need more chopped than what they've given me. We
And
finally
where the
got
hell
a
is
little-
Zeb?
And Zeb,
Oh,
yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It has to be a budget thing. It has to be a
No,
budget
okay,
thing.
now no. I was really critical of this before, but now that they've opened up the storyline of everyone who's with the New Republic who has done this little rogue mission is now in trouble and is going to be on. So like him not being there now saves him from this judicial punishment, and so that I'm sure is the reasoning. But it's still annoying. Like, why are you going to invite Carson Teva and not fucking Zeb?
The guy who he was beside, Zeb was beside him in the Mandalorian. Like
Yeah,
they were
I
sitting
know.
side by side in
I
the
know.
little bar.
But I recognize now narratively he has to be out of this judicial red tape. So at least that's what I'm assuming. So he's gonna show up eventually. He has to. If not, what the fuck?
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with you there. And I am holding on to my theory that the next season of The Mandalorian will be another somewhat continuation of Rebels, and we're gonna see Hera, and we're gonna see Sabine, and we're gonna see Zeb working as Rangers of the New Republic alongside Din Djarin, at least for a few missions. I think that's gonna happen. I love the idea of Ezra being Jason's master. When like they're clearly hinting Jason wants to be a fucking Jedi. Like he wants it so bad.
He's got the sauce. Are you kidding me? This kid
Yeah.
is gifted.
Yeah, big time. And the one thing, like, Kanan was never that strong of a fighter, but he, by the end of his life, became one of the more powerful Jedis with the Force. He had a greater understanding of the Force than most Jedi, I think, did by the end of his tenure,
Well,
thanks to Bendu.
You see in Bad Batch, I love this little sneaky little reference in Bad Batch, but you see him as a Padawan, and you know how young he is when Order 66 happens. So you kind of get a sense of how long he's been fending for himself. And by the time, with all that in perspective, by the time we meet him in Rebels and what he imparts to Ezra, obviously he goes on a massive journey and learns a lot himself in the show. But even at the beginning, he's pretty far along for someone who was pretty freaking young when he lost his master and then had to just Cal Kestis himself, basically. So it's impressive to see how attuned he is with the Force. Like you said, yes, Bendu is a great aspect of that, but to not minimize the work Kanan did himself, his journey is incredible. I mean, he it's one of the longest in Star Wars, I would say.
A moment that will mean absolutely nothing to those who haven't seen Rebels because they won't understand the same like connection, but I think it's worth noting, and we can't forget that Ezra still doesn't know that Jason exists. And
Aw.
the first time he's back and he sees a little Kanan, that's going to be a pretty emotional moment because he has not seen his master in a long ass time. And to all of a sudden there be a mini version who he doesn't even know exists, I think is going to be pretty hard hitting. We see this amazing, spectacular visual performance of the Purrgil, where it looks so cool. I was as astounded as all of the Rangers, all the New Republic people were watching these Purrgil go through. And like you mentioned earlier, Adam, full tale of Jonah from the Bible. It was like literally exactly Tony Stark going, Jarvis, have you ever heard of the tale of Jonah? And Jarvis going, I don't think he should be the best role model for this situation. So whatever it is that he says, that was Hu Yang, that was Ahsoka. They go in the belly. What did you think of the whole scene with the Purrgil, the mystery of the space whales, and do you think that as Carson Teva explained this extremely far-fetched story that they then see happening, do you think that's going to kind of clear the air for Hera and Carson a little bit and make them be allowed to go about their stuff a little bit while holding their ranks?
First, that's a question for me, right? I was making sure you
That
were.
was that was Aubree, but I mean, I
Oh,
can
okay.
split it. Into, I
Oh, okay, I can go
I
Aubree.
might
then,
have
'cause
split
I
Adam.
didn't think you mentioned anybody. I was like waiting for you to say.
I meant to
or
say
mention my
Aubree,
name.
but then as no one answered, and then you were confused. I'm assuming I'm the one who fucked that up.
You go ahead, Aubree.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I think I have to say rip Purgle teeth. Now they have Baleen, which is like fine, but still not the cute little Purgle teeth. So, you know. But second, I don't know. I mean, I think had the New Republic seen Ahsoka like kind of commune with the Purgle, that had been one thing. But they didn't. I think it's also especially poignant that Ahsoka like communed with them similarly to how she did as a baby with the tiger in Tales of the Jedi. And that was really fun to see, like a full circle moment. That's just like a little tidbit. But I don't know. I mean, there was proof of a map. And even then, like the New Republic was saying, oh no, like there's nothing. And then there ended up being a map, and then they ended up going and like doing this whole thing.
New
And it's
Republic
still,
is so whack. I'm sorry. I
yeah,
just have to say
They're
that.
the
Like,
worst.
they're
At the
god
end of the
awful.
day, at the end of the day, I think we're gonna maybe see towards the end of this series, the member of the Shadow Council as like that we saw in The Mandalorian, a part of this New Republic crew, because we know they are actively aware that the search for Thrawn is now beginning and taking place.
mhm.
So there's probably somebody pulling the strings to fuck it up to make sure Hera and Ahsoka don't interfere.
Yeah, like with the New Republic, unfortunately, they're doing the same things that like I guess the older Republic had done prior. And in the end, like in the sequels, we see them get to the same place where like the First Order pops up and they're like an Imperial remnant. And that's an issue. And that's why Leia went and like schismed from the New Republic to create the Resistance. So we know in the end, like, this isn't going to turn out well. Even if they believe in Ahsoka and stuff, there's some wrong things going on, unfortunately. I think I got really mad at Mon Mothma, specifically. Like, love her and Andor. I mean, like, the whole selling off her daughter thing wasn't great. And like,
You go
Not a
through
good
all
look.
this shit, and
Not a
that
good
you go through all this shit, and that's how you're handling when you're the fucking chancellor.
yeah, exactly. And
Unreal.
like, I know she seems like, I think maybe even Andor is kind of showing us, like, hey, you guys like the rebellion, but the rebellion isn't perfect. Like, even Saw Gerrera, he didn't like them because they weren't perfect, and so he did his own thing, and that also wasn't perfect either. That was by no means better. But, like, bad stuff is going on, and bad stuff is still going on, and unfortunately, like, the only people who really, like, get it is the people who understand the Force and understand that there is, like, a bigger picture light side dark side thing, because even if you think of the original trilogy, like, honestly, the rebellion is probably like, okay, cool, this guy named Luke was able to like blow up the Death Star and able to like defeat Darth Vader, whatever, but they didn't actually like understand the whole Force part of it all. And like, still they clearly don't understand that, so I don't think that they're ever going to have that wake up call. I know it's pessimistic, but
Correct me
We,
if I'm
we know
wrong.
they don't yet because they're going to turn into the First Order.
Correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, but one of the criticisms of the sequel trilogy was like, how the fuck can they let it all devolve into chaos like so quickly?
Yeah.
And so I think because of that, in the Mandoverse, we've had this really heavy-handed New Republic sucks storylines that are happening that I think could be more subtly handled, but because of the criticism that happened back then, they're like, all right, we need to let them know how it all got so bad so quick. And I think, like, people like Mon Mothma really have no excuse at this point because you
Yeah.
were there back then. You know the Jedi. You know like what led to the like you could like. We need Padme. We need Padme.
Mhm.
We need a senator like Padme to lead the New Republic.
Totally. And I think
And Leia couldn't do it, obviously.
We got the quick, like, we got as much cover from Senator Organa as possible. We got the quick Leia
Mhm.
mention in this one.
Leia wasn't high up enough to like exact any meaningful change, so she was like, I gotta do this rebellion shit again, which
yeah,
is
well, when you read I think it's the Aftermath books as well as the Leia books, which are like Journey to the Force Awakens, it kind of like covers that in that like Leia this whole time is screaming at everyone like, hey, we need to like pump the brakes. This is what happened before. We can't just do the same thing again. And they keep on doing the same thing again. And it gets to the point that like the rest of the galaxy didn't know that her dad was Vader. And there's like one of the politicians uses that and it becomes like a whole thing and her career ends up being like partially ruined and things like that. And the reason why she made the resistance was because she was so fed up with the New Republic not listening to her and not like knowing what happened. And also specifically she saw that Snoke and the First Order was an issue and they're like, oh no, they're not, like they're just kind of doing their own thing, it's fine, but it's not affecting us right now, until it literally affected them.
It's
So.
Garrett, and I love that you brought up the point of like we watched the sequel trilogy, and it's like how did this happen again? And that's a criticism, but we're fucking living that right now. We're literally living that like what is Star Wars based on? The rise of fascism and the United States becoming too powerful and becoming an empire. And so much of it was paralleled around the Vietnam War with the original when the original trilogy was written, and we're seeing the quote unquote good guys get powerful and more evil as time goes on, and then it happens again. As history is written by the oppressor. And so as the remnants of the Imperial remnants are still there in the New Republic working to create the First Order, that the people up there going, hey, yeah, they're not a big deal. Why? Because they're trying to help those people ascend into power. And we obviously know that it does in fact happen with the First Order coming to power in the very near future after the new set of Filoni's movies that we're going to be getting here, which so wildly excited about. Adam, like we mentioned at the beginning to end here, Ahsoka was back. This was trusting in the Force, confident, light, funny. That's one quick thing we didn't really talk about other than mentioning the chemistry between Hayden and Ariana Greenblatt was like getting to see the two of them banter like they did in the Clone Wars was so fun. You look old. Just like straight up from the beginning, and then even with Ariana Greenblatt and Hayden going back and forth at it, but that was the Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka we've been looking for since the beginning of the series.
Oh yeah, I mean we also have to talk about too at the very end. That's all-time Ahsoka look. The white, like I mean, just like it is at the end of season 7 in the Clone Wars. Fucking perfect, 10 out of 10, no no's. But like, I really just can't wait to see where they take her from here. I want to add one small thing because I need to talk about the New Republic, and I just got to say, Thunderbolt Ross special going on here at the New Republic, just failing upwards all the time. Like everybody seems to just keep fucking up and keep getting promoted, and then you've got this council of people sitting up at the top that none of them know. I mean, it's exactly what happens with Thunderbolt Ross. What's that? The first time we see him in Marvel, he fucks up the Hulk stuff, and now he's the president. I mean, this is exactly how the First Order got here. I mean, it's unreal. Like I had to say my piece on that because it's just like watching all that stuff go down with them. Like it's so frustrating because I'm sure Hera's going to be in trouble when she gets back because they're a bunch of idiots. And like Aubree said, nobody was there to see it, so they're not going to believe it. They're just going to have some shit to say. But I'm super excited for like the future of Ahsoka. I do hope. Like Garrett said at the beginning too, that's like one of my only reservations moving forward. Like it's hard to imagine we're traveling into this other galaxy and the next thing you know, we go back into this like conference room for this New Republic briefing. I'm just like, nothing like upsets me more than thinking about that. But like, I know it's going to happen, but I hope they at least like give us something to really, really like bring Zeb back or do something like have Zeb have to do something to like get to rescue them or whatever. Give us something to care about there, because with the Purgle and where they're going to end up next, like that's going to be crazy. My only reservation on that side is like galaxies are pretty big. What are the odds that the Purgle GPS takes them to like the exact right location? Is there a chance that like they get there and they're on the wrong side of the galaxy? They like little side mission next week. I
She's
hope
gonna
not. I
find
don't
Cal
want to see that.
Kestis.
Birds have like migration paths, okay? It's not like the craziest thing.
It's also the Force, you know, like the Mystic Force, like the Universal Force. Like I'm sure it'll work out.
Do you like
I hope it
that?
does,
She
yeah.
probably was like Ahsoka's Force subconscious was probably sitting there saying, "Hey, you guys remember the only other person you guys are friends with? Take me there. Take me to him."
I hope
because
so.
that's
Yeah,
what
like,
I'm
I have
looking
no.
for.
I want that to be the case. Like, I don't want it to be like, oh, we end up halfway across the galaxy and we have to do some side quest bullshit. I'm like, let's just full steam ahead for these last 3 episodes. Focus on this story, and like they've got a lot to wrap up. But like, I have full faith. Like, there's no reason to not have full confidence in Filoni to pull this off for the last 3 episodes.
The show started with Hera kind of re-emphasizing once a rebel, always a rebel. And so I could see I don't think they're going to spend a lot of time doing diplomatic stuff here. I think it's going to be like either it's dropped or Hera is dropped and we get repercussions for her, but she goes, fuck it. I'm going to keep doing what I've always done anyway. The ghost is mine. It's not yours. And it's like MTF actually said in chat, I think that's a great theory that this could just be a precursor to a resurrected Rogue Squadron movie with Hera as the lead, because who would be a better lead for a Rogue Squadron movie than Hera Syndulla? And so I could definitely see that being the case where she just decides, all right, well, if I'm not a general, then I'm just a rebel again. But I really think that at least these next 2 episodes are going to be a lot more so focused on Ezra, Thrawn, Ahsoka, Sabine, because we got to meet these people eventually. Especially if like this show, they're either going to have to do one of 2 things here. I feel like Ezra and Thrawn will have to be more involved in these final 3 episodes, or this show will have to finish with something like The Mandalorian Season 2 did, with a tease of the Book of Boba Fett that nobody knew was coming, and it was an announcement of where this story will be picked up. Maybe something like that with Thrawn, maybe something like that with Ezra.
God, no. If we spend the next 3 episodes and we don't get Ezra and Thrawn, I was gonna say something drastic, but I'm gonna change it to I'll cry.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think we're gonna have to get a decent amount of them. Like, I don't think it's gonna be they're found and then the series ends. Like, I think this next episode is gonna be pretty heavily with them.
I hope so, because I mean, I'm happy that by this time every player, well, not every player, but I guess the players that need to be in the next galaxy we're all there now at this point, so we can get along with the story. Now we better start finding out what's happened to Thrawn or Ezra. Otherwise, what are we going to be doing in this other galaxy? So I expect this next episode to kind of get going pretty quickly. Maybe even start with what's going on with Thrawn and Ezra, and then cut back to like Sabine and Balin and Elsbeth and all them, you know, like hyper driving in. But I'm hoping that these next 3 are pretty, or however many are next, are pretty breakneck, and we get down to the point of what's been going on. We get the reunions. We get our Ahsoka Sabine reunion and resolution arc where she can be a better master and all this stuff. So there, like you said, Adam, there's a lot to go over. So I expect that it's going to be kind of breakneck. And I'm not 1,000% convinced that we're not going to see Hayden Christensen again, because I saw something saying that there's like lines and obviously lines and teasers don't 100% happen and come to fruition in the actual shows or movies that we watch, but there's like a lot of lines that Hayden Christensen says in some teasers that like have not happened yet. So, and they make sense to happen based on hearing them. So I think that we possibly could be getting more Hayden Christensen, Anakin, and so that being said, there's a lot to cover. I expect these episodes are going to move.
I could almost see Ahsoka not being even in this next episode all that much. I could see her not finding Thrawn and Ezra and Sabine until the very end. And this episode is more Thrawn and Ezra focused, with Sabine, Morgan, Balin, etc. finding them. And then Ahsoka kind of gets weaved into it by the end of the episode. But regardless, we have 3 episodes left, and they're bound to be incredibly, incredibly exciting. Aubree, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can the people find you on socials, and give the viewers a little taste of what it is you do?
Yeah, of course. So you can find me at Dreamed of Magic on most social media sites, as well as on the Convor Call, which is my Star Wars podcast. We're not doing anything because of the SAG strike right now, unfortunately. But you can also find me and my writing at Streamr, Streamr Entertainment, where I am a director of fandom content as well as an editor and writer. So I cover a lot more non-Star Wars stuff there. Yeah.
Aubree is incredible. Make sure you follow her on socials at Dreamed of Magic. Gee, I'm not going to do anything crazy like make you commit to when you're going to be back again and how often you're going to be doing stuff, but I'm so thankful to be on here with you, seeing your face. I miss you. I love you, and you're obviously welcome to be back joining us whenever you want to be. But just this little taste was delightful.
No, I might give the people a tease. I've dipped my feet in the past week or so. I've read through a couple of Adam's pieces. I know that Aisha and Ryan have been absolutely living it up at TIFF this past week and are churning through some reviews right now. So I do plan on getting involved in that action. I have some FOMO and didn't want to be not included in that. And then, Ethan Simi is going to the New York Film Festival at the end of the month. So I can't leave you guys, on the hook for that without me. So let's just say I plan to be getting my feet more wet this month, and I miss you all so much, and plan to hopefully take some strides in the next steps for Agents of Fandom. So I'm TJ. Thank you for setting this up. It's been a delight. It was, like I said, it was so incredibly hard to keep my mouth shut from everyone, but it's just a pleasure to see you, buddy. Adam, great to see you too, and Aubree. When I saw that you were a guest on the pod, but I was in my little sabbatical, I was bummed. So I'm happy that we're able to make it right here and meet face to face, because you're incredible. Your work is great, and
Oh, thank
um,
you.
and so this was just awesome. Thank you, TJ, and thanks, Dave, for an awesome show that we can talk about. But the studio should pay their writers and actors. So.
Yeah.
Tell them, so that we can keep getting more great content like this.
Come
and
on.
so the wonderful,
Not that
nice,
hard.
talented people who make the things that make our lives so much better are properly I was going to say
Don't say consummated.
Don't
Don't
say-
say
I wasn't going to say consummated. I was going to say constipated, but I meant compensated.
Worse somehow.
Yeah, none of compensated, so that they can be properly compensated. Gee, it was so great to have you back. This was a absolute blast, and shout out to not only the people who watching this on YouTube after the fact, hitting that like button, watching us on the podcast feeds, but a lot of new live viewers in the Twitch chat today. A lot of first time viewers. Shout out to Misa behind you. Funny name, commenting on my Funko collection behind me, and a lot of fun new people in there joining us today. So thank you so much for that. And we got lots of great content coming. Like Garrett said, Ryan and Aisha reviewing some stuff from TIFF right now that they just were at. I got the Edmonton Expo. I'm leaving tomorrow. The weekend after that, I got the Saskatchewan Expo, where I'll hopefully, fingers crossed, be moderating my very first panel. It'll be Nolan North's panel, the voice of Nathan Drake in Uncharted, and so many other great things. But I did just see today that he is feeling under the weather and is unable to make it to Edmonton this weekend. So fingers crossed that, knocking on wood, that he's going to be feeling better, and we'll be able to make that happen the week after. I'll be reviewing every episode of Ahsoka. Episode 5 is up reviewed on agentsfandom.com right now. Adam, you just put together another piece in your MCU rewatch review, a wonderful review of Captain America. What else do we got coming up here in the near future?
Well, Garrett pretty much, nailed everything. Talking about we got the biggest thing right now is the TIFF stuff. We're working on getting that all out right now, but over the next 7 to 10 days, we're planning on having at least like 7 to 12, anywhere in that range, reviews from coming out of TIFF. So really, really exciting there. I mean, Pain Hustlers, Dumb Money, and then all kinds of other movies that I haven't heard of. I don't think we're going to be reviewing Pool Man, unfortunately, after everybody said that is one of the worst movies of the last 5 years. They decided to go in another direction.
Aisha like it though? I think Aisha liked it.
No, she opted to not see it after everybody was talking about it was so bad. I think she was either it was that or something else, but she opted not to see it.
She liked Blasco Wins.
That's
right.
That's what it was.
She did. Yeah, she liked that one. Yeah. But yeah, all the TIFF stuff, MCU stuff, Star Wars stuff. I mean, we got everything over here. So everybody keep an eye out on the website. And shout out to the entire team. Garrett, welcome back. It was so good to see you, buddy. It's good to see your face. Aubree was an awesome guest as always. TJ, you killed it. This was just a great show. This was incredible.
Really, really fun show. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We will be back next week talking episodes of Ahsoka, as well as giving a little bit of a recap of my time at the Edmonton Expo. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and we will see you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.